Yes.
That's primary.
Yes.
Then, in addition to that, what worked for me was finding these amazing women. So there's people of all genders who are doing fantastic sex ed. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, I happened to find these women, and they were mostly postmenopausal women. I call them goddess crones.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
And they are these women passing on sex education, teaching other women about pleasure. So as an example, I have a private session with a tantrika, a 72-year-old tantrika. I go to see her basically for a private lesson in my body. So I don't have sex with her, but it's intimate. I'm undressed from the waist down on her bed in her, she's got a studio, you could call it. And she is showing me where is my clitoral hood, where is the button of the clitoris, where is my G-spot, to help me to find the G-spot. Well, she goes right in.
Yes.
With my consent.
Sure.
So, but I didn't know, I couldn't show my partner, going back to the 15-year-old boy, right? We're learning, those of us who sleep with men, often we're learning from these early boyfriends. They are tasked with showing us our own bodies, and they don't know. And if they don't know, how are we supposed to know?
I mean, first we are supposed to know is what I think, you know?
Well, we are, but we're not often, we delegate it to them because we are 16 or 17 or 15.
Yep,
So
and we don't know.
We don't know, so we're like, well, he's a guy, he's supposed to know. So he doesn't know, and then we think we're broken because he's having a grand old time and we are not, right? So anyway, so very late in life, right? Of course, I went and I found the diagnoses, and then the goddess Crohn's tantrika. I went and took it was a pleasure workshop, a whole weekend. So it's all day Saturday, you go home, and then you come back all day Sunday with Betty Dodson. And Betty Dodson.
Can you say that again? Who is? Yes. Okay.
Yes, Betty, Betty Dodson, Dodson. Betty Dodson is, when I went to see her 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago, she was 86. Yeah, and so she now is 91 years old, and she's still doing these workshops. She's still doing these weekends where you spend all day Saturday, all day Sunday, learning about, you're nude the entire weekend with other women. And you are learning about your body. You're discussing female pleasure, female anatomy, female arousal. And on day 2, she teaches a masturbation technique that you do in real time.
With everybody else around you?
It's a circle jerk. It's a circle jerk, but it's therapeutic, and it's sisterly, and it's not really clinical. It's not really clinical, but for me it wasn't really erotic either. It was just information about my body in the company of other women exploring their own bodies.
So what happened as a result of those experiences? What were you able to take away, take home, and use to transform, if you did, your own experience when you were away from those places?
Yeah, great question, Robin. What I was able to take away is I started to understand arousal. So because of all my issues, I didn't understand arousal. And there was another conditioning, of course, which is the conditioning that many women have. And we'll talk about that as well, but it's so deeply ingrained that it's male pleasure that is the focus, almost the entire intent and content of our sexual experiences. So it was so ingrained that I was just used to performing, right? Like faking orgasms or faking faking having a good time and not having an authentically good time. So I didn't know how to get aroused enough to really have consistent orgasms or even any partnered orgasms.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned was how arousal worked. I learned that women have erectile tissue. This is what I learned from Betty Dodson and the Tantrika. Women have erectile tissue. Women get a hard on, just like a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And women can also, just like a guy might have a partial erection. My husband taught me a term. We love it. I love it. It's called a chubby. A chubby is a partial erection, right? It's not a new term. Other people use it. So I was used to getting chubbies. I wasn't used to getting a full on erect apparatus. So I learned how to get a full erection.
But and does this involve? What does that involve? Learning how to do that. So what allowed for arousal for you then? Was it slowing things down? Was it looking at sexy as opposed to sex? Is that the difference? So I just kind of wonder what some of the ingredients are in there that other people maybe could use.
Yes. So we are, women to women, there's a lot of things going on for us. So let me break it down. First, what's going on for us is stimulation. Just good old, regular old physical stimulation. So the erectile tissue is really interesting when we look at it in the context of getting enough physical stimulation. And again, if we think about the male model, it's helpful for us because the penis that's often what it is responsive to, right?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And we work the same, although we often have a lot more that we need to put into the equation. But we also need to understand that we need to get the right amount and the right kind of physical stimulation. Now this is where the internal clitoris comes in. Hang on, Robin, I have a model of it.
All right.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see it well. This is what a clitoris looks like. That's the side view.
So how is it possible that like somebody as old as me didn't know that until like a year or two ago?
Me too. I didn't learn this until I started my project. Of course, we're not told because we don't learn this in seventh grade, and then we start to fool around, and that person might be a 15-year-old boy or something close to that, and then we're told to like go home and touch ourselves, but we don't know what to do, and then we're watching other people go at it and knocking over the furniture, and we think, oh, something must be wrong with me.
Yes.
All right. So all of this is erectile tissue. This is the clitoral head. That's the part that many people, most people think of as the clitoris. It's only this little part. That's the button. Everything else is also integral, can be integral for our arousal based on stimulation. So the legs run under the inner labia. These are called vestibular bulbs. There's that vestibule word again.
Yes.
And they hug the entrance to the vagina. They're in the vestibule under the skin. This is all under the skin. And they hug the entrance to the vagina. So what happens is women need different kinds of stimulation. Ideally, there's a lot of this that is engorged, right? That's what arousal is physically. It fills with blood, just like and that, right, the tissue expands because of that. So we need blood, and the blood then gives rise to extra lubrication or lubrication, heat, all these sorts of things. But women have to, or ideally women find what works for them. Some people need a lot right on the little tip. Some people need more right here, right? Right in the, maybe even on the outside of the vulva, maybe something a little more indirect, but something that might get at this a little bit more. What these are called legs, clitoral legs. So we need different kinds of things perhaps, and often our partners, they don't know. I met a sex educator from Denmark, and he was actually sharing the work of a fabulous sex educator in the US. Her name is Sherry Winston. And he was sharing her work in Denmark. So we don't know about her work here, but he was sharing her work in Denmark. And he said, well, in Denmark, all the men know, we all know, yes, the clitoris, we are all good about touching the clitoris, but we still think the clitoris is only the little button. Well, I think here in the US, many men still don't know about even the little button.
Yes.
And then and we don't know as women about the whole apparatus to say, you know what, honey, enough with the button already, all right? Enough with the button. How about here? I know when I was, when I was doing all this experimentation, I was finding these different things that seemed so basic, and yet it was like, oh my God, can I ask for that? And it was so simple, like, oh, can you just touch the mound on the outside?
Yes, sure.
Or touch my stomach. It seemed like illicit to ask for something that wasn't, like, okay, yeah, go down on me, or something like that.
So what you're describing from these older women and these sessions is really something where it's a bonding experience, but it's also highly educational in terms of how our bodies work and how individual bodies work and how experimentation might be necessary, and that there are a variety of things involved in something like arousal that are probably different for each woman. And finding those was part of the process of really healing for you as well.
Definitely. And so I implemented something, I call it the pleasure hour. And it's actually been really helpful during these COVID times. So pleasure hour is 1 hour once a week of pleasure, but you can define that pleasure as you like. Sometimes I just take a nap. Sometimes it's more, right, more erotic. But it's a time for me to get in touch with myself and to be intentional about recovery and discovery. So the recovery part is, I believe that sexual healing is an ongoing process. I have wiring still to seize those muscles, other wiring having to do with having been abused, right? So the recovery part is ongoing. So it's a way for me to, meet my demons in a sense, and make peace with them, have practices, right? And the discovery part is that. The discovery part is learning about my body, learning about how it works, and works today, because especially those of us who are over 40, our bodies keep changing and changing and changing. Our relationships may change, right? So I think that the discovery also is absolutely ongoing. So yeah, I recommend that even if somebody can't implement this on a weekly basis, that they at least start off with solo sessions to really get in touch with what's going on. Now, if a woman has started to have painful sex because of atrophy or GSM, then it's especially important that she take time by herself to reconnect with her body, because if the guy is there or somebody there who is, right, who wants to get it on through penetrative sex, then it is too much pressure. The body is just going to go, even if the mind is willing. So I think it's really can be very important for a woman to find this solo time in order to reconnect without any pressure whatsoever.
Interesting.
yeah, so I think getting in touch with, right, with what is going
Yes.
on, but that's
Mhm,
only the stimulation part.
mhm,
There's also,
mhm.
of course, all the mental part and the different kinds of erotic intelligence, if you will. And
Mhm.
that can change over time. That certainly changes when we're with a partner over the long term. And
Sure.
so that is really a question of, I think the pleasure hour can also be really, really helpful because alone we can say, huh, what am I interested in that I've maybe have never asked for,
Mhm.
right? What am I interested in that maybe outside my relationship in terms of a fantasy, right? I'm not going to ask my partner, or maybe I will ask my partner to have an open relationship, but here I
Mhm.
am alone. Maybe I can open myself up to that without feeling, oh, I feel weird about, thinking about somebody else while I'm having sex. Although
Mhm.
I personally think that you can think about any you can put
Sure.
anything in your mind when you're having partner
Sure.
sex.
Mhm.
That's what we can feed ourselves, and that I don't believe that that is a betrayal of our partner. But anyway, pleasure hour is a time to also reconnect, and then to if we want to bring that spark back into our relationship, which can be so much a part of also being our age and being
Mhm.
relationship for a long time, we can use that laboratory of the pleasure hour to bring things into our partnered relationship in a way, of course, that's right, that's in keeping with the dynamics of our relationship. But I know it's a side issue, but it really is relevant here, that communication piece. For instance,
Mhm.
how do I take what I just discovered on my own, and then bring that in with my partner who might be quite attached, for instance, to how things have been in the past, which is me
Mhm.
pretending that I'm having a good time
Interesting.
or
Yes.
having a painful experience and not speaking up or not
Mhm.
speaking up all the time. So the communication piece is key. And for that, what I recommend is, rather than two things, I think it's important to frame the conversation in a positive way. So this is
Mhm.
what is, I just discovered something that's interesting to me, um, rather than I want to talk about what's really not working
Mhm.
in our bedroom. So you want to you want to disarm
Mhm.
the other person as much as possible, and just not make them feel rejected. It's
Sure.
not
Mhm.
manipulative. So framing it in a positive way. This is what I'm interested in something, and then what I recommend. So it's a two-step process. That is right. The second step is that what you do is you show your partner something you found. You don't say, "Hey, let's talk about this." You just say, "All right, here I want to show you what it is." Now, if
Mhm.
you think your partner might be quite resistant, or that they may be really defensive, it can be something quite mild, let's say like a couples massage video.
Mm.
You see, because often the communication channel is not there. You've never
Interesting.
really had a conversation about your own sexuality and what
Mhm.
really your needs are, or you've never really had a conversation about your own dissatisfaction, which can be very scary to talk about,
Sure.
right? So this then becomes a safer way to introduce the topic, and sometimes it's merely to open up a conversation around your bedroom, by
Mhm.
showing benign, um,
Yes.
and yeah.
You know, so you you actually were part of a few, I guess you'd call them risque treatment sessions with your husband. And
Yeah.
so now that we're talking about getting a partner on board, that was more than just beginning the discussion. You all were part of things that I would presume some spouses might be resistant to, but how did you introduce that and how did it become possible for um, him to think that was okay?
Yes. So I should mention that my project was, I only was able to heal myself because I decided to write about it and turn this into a one-person play. And no, if you're doing sexual healing, you don't have to create a one-person play. But I
Right.
felt so stuck. I needed a way to process.
Mhm.
I needed some sort of a process, and that was a process that was familiar to me. And in my book, the whole idea of a pleasure plan is just finding your own process, even if it's just a journal that you take
Yes.
yourself through. So that said, when I started my project, my husband was very resistant. He was not on board. He was quite threatened. I'd never talked about having pain with him. Never.
Mm.
Even though
Ah,
I had pain for my entire life with sex.
interesting.
So, and then I was doing this crazy thing, putting our sex life on the stage, and he thought it was pathological. That was the word he used, pathological,
Mhm.
stirring up trauma. And anyway, he was very suspicious of the whole thing. But I started to get better very
Mhm.
slowly,
Mhm.
incrementally, but also I started getting interested in sex because partnered sex was part of my laboratory, right?
Sure.
I was actively working on it. And that part was really interested
Mhm.
in him. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, you're interested. Sure, whatever you want to work on is fine. If you want to have sex, great. Whatever you want to work on is fine. Just
Yep. Sure.
so
So that was a persuasive tool.
it was a persuasive tool. And then over time, my husband started to really get jealous in a way that I was working on all of this healing, and that oh, what about him? What about
Ah.
his own healing? Because
Mhm.
he, like everyone else has, right, has a history of sexuality and different kinds of wounds,
Yes.
and whatever his upbringing was. And so he thought, okay, well, I want to do sexual healing as well. So by the end of the project, we went to see that tantrika. We went as a couple, and we got completely naked together. We didn't have penetrative sex or anything, but we did. We she did teach us different kinds of bonding techniques um,
Mhm.
while we were nude, and I also in that session I admitted to him for the first time that I didn't actually like his kisses.
Oh, I do remember that now. Wow. That's
Big,
pretty major.
it's major. It's major. It's
Mhm.
and
Yes.
we worked on
Did,
them in the
so
session.
has that changed?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
because I spoke up. And what
Mhm.
he revealed was that what I wanted to do instead, well, he didn't like that.
Yep.
So we worked out a compromise.
Mhm.
you know, it was yes. So now, and now, when we're kissing, and I'd say I like very like hard kisses, closed mouth. So I
Mhm.
say, okay, let's have those like hard kisses now. It's like, okay,
Uh-huh.
let's have more of the the deeper kiss. Okay, let's switch to the deeper kisses so we can go.
Sure. So it opened up a huge amount of communication, it sounds like, between you over a subject in a huge area that is not always known for open communicate. It's, open communication.
Right. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing where often we just think we're left with what we get, what
Sure.
we have, and that we don't have the right perhaps to speak
Mm-hmm.
up and to ask for something different. But then that opens up a whole channel to find the melding, to find the compromise
Mm-hmm.
and the blend, the right blend for that couple.
You know, a part of your a part of your history, I guess I would say, was some of the sexual trauma that you had suffered as a child, a really young child, at the hands of an older man and maybe a teenage boy, I think it was. And I don't think that, I think that's not uncommon. And so how did that influence sort of what you felt and how you thought about yourself and maybe your ability to heal?
Thank you for that question, because so many people have experienced different kinds
Mhm.
of trauma. We know it from Me Too, and it's a big problem. So in my case, the trauma lived physically in my body.
Mm.
That was primarily where it lived, although there were other aspects of it as well. But the physical part was hidden for me because I went to therapy, as one is supposed to do when you're 27 years old and you live in New York. You just have to go. This was somebody once said, you can't get an apartment in New York unless you have a note from your therapist.
Sure.
So I went to therapy dutifully when I was 27 years old, and I immediately started working on my sexual trauma. I was very open, the fact that I'd been abused, and I worked on it basically for 20 years with different therapists over time and spanning different geographies. But I never addressed the sexual component of that, the way that my body shut down, right? Because, right, something had come at me when I was a young child and my body went like this and it got stuck like that. And this is an aspect of sexual healing that for many people doesn't get addressed, because in our therapeutics, we are often, in our therapy sessions, we are often talking about our emotions. We're talking about our psychological framing, but we're not talking about the body's response.
Sure.
The analogy I use is if I had been attacked, let's say when I was a child, if somebody had attacked and hurt my knee, let's say it was a boy, a bully, then throughout my life, I might be triggered if I saw someone who looked like that bully. I may be angry at my mother because she didn't protect me from the bully. But I may have problems with my knee.
And you protect it, and you wouldn't want anybody to touch it. And
all of that. And yet when we talk about sexual trauma, we're often not saying, oh yeah, I understand you're mad at your mother, you're triggered when you see a guy who looks like this, but how's your knee doing?
Yes, I see. That's really interesting. Very interesting point. So you found a way to sort of blend the psychological with the physical in that way to see what the effect of trauma what effect it may have had.
Definitely. So that is really that was the neglected area. I won't say that I didn't or don't have other kinds of ramifications that have to do with being abused. Abuse is basically, trauma really is an experience of feeling unsafe. So I think for somebody who's been harmed, that feeling of being unsafe is going to be wired in different ways. And that's why I believe the healing, trauma healing and all sexual healing, all kinds of healing is an ongoing process, because you're working with your own wiring. You're rewiring and continuously rewiring. So I definitely, developmentally, there are certainly different aspects of my life profoundly affected by this trauma. But the way that it most landed, I believe, for me, was in this physical way, and with this physical lockdown, and that's the way that's the part of it that was very, very neglected over time because of not understanding that it needed to be addressed.
So I think what I'm wondering is you put in such a tremendous amount of work. Would you call yourself healed now? Or is that a process that has no real ending, per se?
I would call myself 100% healed to the extent that I have now fantastic sex. That was my goal through the pleasure plan. Simple goal, want to have great sex. At the end, I learned how to have great sex.
End of story.
But the other half of the story, is healing is ongoing. I'm going to be 57 years old. I'm in menopause. There are ongoing changes in my body. I manage those. I manage those. I manage them through estrogen. I manage them through my pleasure hour. I manage them through continuously getting in touch with my body. For me, like for many women, anxiety is often
Mm.
the biggest obstacle in terms of being
Mhm.
able to feel sexy, being able to
Yep.
feel in the mood. So I manage that like many of us do. So it's two things, right? I wanted this great sex. I got it, but it's not a static thing. It's something that I work very consciously on through these
Mhm.
practices. And also it's something that my husband and I work on as a couple.
Mhm.
We're very, very intentional about
Mhm.
keeping keeping our relationship exciting for both of us.
Well, and now you do for other women what some women had done for you. You're a sexuality educator.
Yes.
And so you spend your time, how does that work for you? How does that play out? How does a sexuality educator work?
Okay. So I do it in a number of ways. I do public speaking, which I absolutely love, especially it's being able to take my history working in the theater and now putting that into
Mhm.
play in a very different kind of way, providing sexual education, but with a bit of pizzazz.
Yes.
So public speaking, I do different kind for organizations around this topic. I'm working a lot on university campuses, connecting for them consent education and pleasure education,
Hmm.
particularly, and also teaching women who have been assaulted how to reconnect with their sexuality.
Yes.
Public speaking, I'm doing different kinds of workshops, and then I do these information sessions. I call it sexual healing info sessions,
Hmm.
and they're one-time sessions. Somebody can come to me, and my ideal client is somebody who doesn't know what's going on, and they don't know really
Ah, uh-huh.
where to start, and they need to just talk to somebody and say, this is all the stuff that's going on.
Sure,
And
sure.
so it's not psychotherapy. It's not in
Hmm.
lieu of psychotherapy. It's also not in lieu of going to see a doctor, a medical doctor, and getting one of those great diagnoses.
Hmm.
But I could be, for many people, I'm the first stop. I'm the person who could help them find a great doctor who has this
Really
specialized
interesting.
knowledge. Um,
Yes.
or might point them in the direction, might give them resources and point them in the direction of resources so that they can see, oh, okay, you're having these barrier issues. Take a look at these resources about vaginismus and see if that's something that's going on. Talk to your
Mhm.
doctor to see if maybe you have vaginismus. There's a test for vaginismus.
Yes. Hmm.
Talk to your doctor about vestibulodynia, especially since if it's a lot of burning and that's something that has never really come up. So there's all kinds of different ways that I might direct someone on their path.
Yeah, well, to me, it sounds like you've become the kind of research bridging practitioners that you didn't have, that you were looking for as well.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah,
hmm.
I just felt completely broken. I felt like there was no hope for me. I didn't think that there were other people who had this plethora of
Hmm.
issues or this combination of issues. It was so overwhelming and also amorphous. I didn't see how to delineate it in a way that would
Hmm.
make it clear to me what the heck was going on. And I felt I didn't know where to turn because I was like, well, I went to my doctor. She seemed uncomfortable. I went to see a shrink, and she just said I should lie there and let my husband do what he does in order for him not to leave me. So I just felt like, well, okay, so what do I do with that?
Hmm.
I didn't
And
know where to go from there.
I mean, and you could have really used somebody like you
Yes.
who to work with you. Well, look, I want to thank you for joining us today. I found it really interesting and so fun to talk to you.
Thank,
Um,
thank you so much.
yes, and so good luck with your book, with launching it, and with everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. So I'll mention my book comes out May 5th, but I also have a big book launch at Politics and Prose. It'll be virtual on May 16th. And I'm doing a webinar with Rachel Rubin on, on my publication day next Tuesday. So I'll put those links in as well. We can.
That would be great, because I think people who listen to this would want to, I mean, I'll want to listen to it.
Yeah, I think it'll be great. It's 6:30 to 7:30 on the 5th of May.
Well, great. Thanks, Laura. Thank you. And I'll talk to you later.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.